doing a countdown. We're live, Chris.
We are live. Chris, Lee and Blayne Gilmer of Southeastern 14. Sometimes plans get in the way of life, but in any case, happy to be going live this afternoon to talk some SEC football. And Blayne, it has been a pretty decent year if you're the SEC in bowl games, all things considered. It maybe you didn't win them all, but you got the ones maybe that you wanted the most. It might be a good way to put it. And hey, you're not the Big Ten, right?
Yeah, the marquee games seem to be going your way. And then even games that I don't know how many people honestly could have been that confident maybe in the Kentucky game just with how things were going. And Kentucky had a chance to win that one there at the end against what many people still consider as a premier ACC team, with Clemson. So we're going to dive into all of it. Last show here of 2023 on New Year's Eve here. So we're excited to do that. And Chris, we're going to break it all down, but I know you got to get a word in from our sponsors, and then we'll get rolling.
Yes, this show is sponsored by our friends at BetOnline. All the major sports are in action this week. College football playoff is ready to go. BetOnline, your number one destination for all your sports wagering info, including news for pro football, the NBA, upcoming fights, and NHL games this season. Head to the website today to get into the action. See all the updated odds for the week. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, to get your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Blayne, let's start with biggest storylines for the SEC and maybe things of importance because, look, it is bowl season. And the thing about bowl season, I liken it anymore to NFL exhibition games. You got teams that are wearing the Cowboys and the Chiefs colors, but they're not always the Cowboys and the Chiefs. For parts of games, they are. Some games, they are more than others. So with that in context, what are the two or three things that stood out to you the most? I've got some in mind, but I haven't compared notes with you just to see what you come up with on your own. So I'll let you start.
I think the thing that you have to look at the most is with the results that happened, particularly for Missouri, for Ole Miss, and for Georgia, and then relate that to what's going forward in 2024. Experienced quarterback play for all three of those teams next year. And what this can lead into. I thought our friend at SEC Unfiltered, Chris Phillips, I saw he made a good point about Missouri having a Connor Shaw type guy in Brady Cook. I think that's a great kind of comparison analogy. Not somebody who is the prettiest player in the world when you get out there that you're going to put on teach tape and say this is how you play quarterback, but he competes his guts out. And then I think you've got Jackson Dart, who's just a totally different animal. I don't know that there's a more perfect quarterback that can, just attitude wise and competitive wise and what he does, skill set wise, mesh with what Lane Kiffin likes to do. And then Carson Beck is just phenomenal and showed why he's going to be phenomenal next year. I think Carson Beck is going to set himself up to be potentially the number one overall pick in the 2025 draft by coming back next year for Georgia. And I was just really impressed by the play of all three of those guys. Even though Cook struggled a little bit against Ohio State, I think everybody would. But man, it was fun to watch some good quarterback play there for guys coming back. And there's two more teams in the SEC, Chris, that are going to fall into that category with Alabama and Texas that we'll get into a little bit later.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing was Ole Miss. And I tweeted this yesterday through our account. I don't want to make too much of the fact about what we saw yesterday because although Ole Miss and Penn State didn't have a ton of bowl opt-outs that I remember on either side. So I think that's one where maybe it was a true reflection. But Ole Miss with what it's adding in the transfer portal, and our friend Chris Phillips pointed this out, they put up this big graphic about all the guys Ole Miss is getting. They didn't include Juice Wells.
Yeah.
And mostly because I think it was sort of a graphic geared towards what Ole Miss is gaining on defense. And let's be honest, Blayne, that's been the question about Ole Miss all along. We always figure out that Lane Kiffin can coach the offensive side of the ball. Can they get good enough defensive talent? That's been the question. I mean, they've been just kind of pedestrian since he's been there. Not bad. They make havoc plays, but they're not a defense that you leave the stadium talking about.
Yeah.
What they are getting on the defensive side, coupled with what they did to Penn State. Penn State was giving up, Blayne, 3.9 yards per play. And we said going into the games, I'm interested to see if the Big Ten, what is it? Is it were the defenses that good because the offenses were that bad, or what? I don't know that really know, because I mean, back to Missouri, Ohio State's offense was dang good, but Penn State statistically I think was a little bit better, at least in terms of yards per play. Ole Miss had no issue with those guys. Ole Miss,
Yeah.
the speed of the game, Penn State could not handle. So I think seeing the way Ole Miss left off, Caden Prescorn had a big day. I think I heard right, he's coming back.
Yeah.
I think is the plan.
My reaction to that was, I was like, Caden Prescorn is going to win the Mackey Award next year. Like,
right. Yeah. I mean, we say that now. Scouts are going to watch that tape and digest it. And who knows, maybe he changes his mind between now and then, but Jackson Dart coming back, Quinshon Judkins coming back. I guess Trey Harris is gone. But I mean, they'll
Trey
find
Harris
receivers.
is coming back too.
Oh, he's back. Okay. Well, that to me, look,
You're
college
Trey
football
Harris
playoff
on one side, Juice Wells on the other side, Caden Prescorn in the middle, Quinshon Judkins. I mean,
I know that the bar for college football playoff is different now because it's 12 teams next year, but that felt like a team, and watching it, Blayne, that could clear the 4-team hurdle for next year based on the way it looked and what we know is coming in.
Yeah, I mean, Walter Nolan alone, he's a game-changing type defensive tackle. He's going to be something that Ole Miss has not had the entirety of Lane Kiffin's tenure there. Not many people do outside of Georgia and Alabama have had defensive tackles of that kind of caliber. And then you add Chris Paul, who's going to be there, the safety that they're bringing in, Lewis from Indiana. I mean, so many players at all the different levels of defense. And then Pete Golding gets to be there and kind of be free. You know, part of Pete Golding's thing was at Alabama, yes, he had his own struggles and things off the field, that kind of stuff. But Pete Golding had to kind of operate within the structure of what Nick Saban wanted to do. And sometimes that doesn't mesh as well and things like that. Well, now Pete Golding is going to kind of be freed up to do his own deal. And I think you saw growth this year out of that Ole Miss defense, but now you insert all that talent in there. It is certainly going to be a interesting deal. But I think the two, obviously Georgia, and we'll get to that in a little bit here, Chris, the dismantling of Florida State. But I think the two teams that probably have to be the most energetic coming out of those performances, Ole Miss and Missouri. And I know that you much like I loved Missouri all year long, but I think you know, two programs that are kind of on what used to be the West and what used to be the East, kind of paralleling each other with really, really big seasons, really, really big acquisitions coming in this offseason, and a lot of talent and a lot of momentum going into 2024.
And Blayne, we left out a guy from Florida too. Our man Prince Lee at Florida. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the last name, but you know,
Alien.
Yeah, well, that's why you're here. But yeah, I mean that and Missouri. Hey, and you can check receipts. I did. I think you may have too. I called Missouri. I thought that was a surprise team in the SEC. No, look, I thought surprise might be winning 9 games. I didn't know it was going to be winning 10 in the regular season and taking the Cotton Bowl with it against Ohio State. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you I nailed that. But here's the thing. If I told you before the season that Brady Cook and Cody Schrader are carrying Ole Miss to 11 wins and Missouri, a double-digit victory over Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, what would you have said?
I mean, that Eli Drinkwitz deserves to be the college football coach of the year. I mean, because, you know, I had them pegged at 9 wins. I thought they would go 9-3. I was higher on them, I think, than most, but a lot of people called me crazy thinking they would go 9-3. But the reasons, I wouldn't have been as shocked, but I would have been more saying, okay, well, what did the defense do? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
because that was what we thought was going to lead them the whole year coming into this was defense. Tyron Hopper, Rakestraw, Abrams Drain, Robinson, all those guys, those names that they had, I think 10 starters returning. Chris, so much
The whole
experience,
secondary.
yeah, so much talent, just ridiculous across the SEC, and it ended up being at times the offense, led the way. Cody Schrader, Theo Weiss at times, because one thing I do think I would have to ask a question if I'm a Missouri fan is, you know, okay, so I'm a Missouri fan, say, and we beat Ohio State. We don't play very well offensively. We do shut them down defensively, but Luther Burden hardly didn't get the ball the entire game, and he's out
Yes.
there running around and playing. Like, get that man the football, and that's not something that typically you would think would be an issue with Eli Drinkwitz and company. So I think that's something that Drinkwitz and Kirby Moore will probably have some conversations about going into next year with their last run with Luther Burden there coming back. So
Yeah, now let's give Ohio State credit. I mean, he had to be in the game plan. They just locked it down with him, and I think
oh yeah,
let Cook and Schrader beat us, and they were good enough. But hey, the defense. Let's circle back to that for a minute. It was like Johnny Walker, who was player of the game, did get a huge penalty that really hurt them. I thought that I think they had Ohio State backed up, and it was an after the play personal foul that really I thought that might be the thing that you look back at the end of the game, and it's why Missouri didn't win. Fortunately, it didn't happen. But it was guys. I think the interesting thing with Missouri is the script looks so different, as you just pointed out with the defense. Now, the defense was good, but if I'd said, hey, this is going to be an 11-win team, I would have said it's a defense that gives up, I don't know, 15 points a game instead of 22, 23, whatever it wound up being.
yeah.
The defense was, if there's one disappointment with that team, it was maybe that it wasn't quite what I hoped it would be. And I said before the year, I thought I thought that Brady Cook was a little better than people had given him credit for being, but I didn't have that in mind when I looked at this season and said, this is what they can be.
No, I think they were much better offensively than people expected them to be. They got that outside zone scheme working tremendously. So kudos to them. Kudos to Ole Miss. Like I said, both of those teams have a lot to play for, in 2024 in terms of expectations, 12-team playoff, schedules kind of aligning, big time offseason acquisitions. But Chris, it's kind of same song, different verse for the Georgia Bulldogs, as now they have defeated their last two bowl games that they played, being the national championship and this game. They have won by a combined score of 128-10 over TCU and Florida State in those games. And yesterday was just a dismantling of the Seminoles. And listen, I know it's not the Seminole team that was there in the ACC championship and even before that for Florida State, but Georgia also was without 6 starters and without 20 guys that that had entered the portal as well in that game. So 26 players absent for Georgia, and they still win a game by 60 points. It was an impressive output by the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, that was one of those may God have mercy on your soul games that Georgia pulls out 2 or 3 times a year. I don't know if this is a fair criticism of Kirby Smart, but there are games that you watch them play and you're like, my goodness, if they did this every week, nobody would ever have a chance anywhere, anytime, any place. Hard to be critical of Kirby Smart, but my goodness. Looking back on that, what was the line at kickoff? 14.5?
It got all the way up to 20.
Okay.
With some of the
So it shot 14.5, I think was the last one I'd seen. I didn't look a couple days before the game. I mean, that still was free money. But
yeah,
I mean, I don't know what you say.
Brian McPhail here says Georgia has 4 and 5 stars playing third string. That's true.
He's right. I looked this up before the season. Georgia had, I believe, Blayne, I think the number was over 64 and 5 stars on that team.
Yeah. It's the recruiting
might have been 70.
Yeah, it's a lot. And here's the thing. there's people that are going to go about it the way that Ole Miss is going to go about it. And I think that Lane Kiffin is doing what he needs to do at Ole Miss to put a competitor out there to go after the transfer portal. And I don't think Lane Kiffin will do that year in and year out, Chris, because I think, one, you have to manage your money. And nobody's been more transparent than Lane Kiffin has been about, hey, this is free agency. This is, you have to go out and spend money. We got to have money in the collective, got to do this and that. But I think they see this year, okay, it's expanding to 12. The schedule is about as favorable as it's going to be. This is the year to go all in and go get it, especially with Dart coming back and some of these other guys coming back. But Georgia, just year in and year out, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, maybe Ohio State, there's 5 or 6 programs in the country that have separated themselves in terms of the upper echelon of the high school recruiting, that they've done it to such an extent over the last 5-6 years that they literally, that's where they believe in building the nucleus of their roster and going forward, particularly along the lines of scrimmage. Kirby Smart says, hey, you cannot fix your ills in the transfer portal along the lines of scrimmage. He said, big bodies that can move, you have to find them out of high school, you have to retain them, and you have to develop them. And that's what Georgia and Alabama and some of these perennial playoff teams, even a Michigan to a certain extent, have been able to do, is to develop, especially along the trenches from the high school ranks. And that's what you're talking about, Chris, with that depth. But Georgia also does it at the at the skill positions as well.
Thank you to Eric Wilper for the super chat. Those help us a lot. Boy, Missouri's got some gloating to do today, and you can't blame them.
Yeah.
This segues into something I wanted to ask you about, and I'm interested to get your reaction because I haven't thought about it either. The question just kind of popped into my head. If you said the next 5 years, name the 10 teams that are poised to have the most success in college football, where do you go? Let's get some of the easy ones out of the way, right? I think my mind immediately goes to Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. Probably is my top 3.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ohio State kind of by default. I don't know. I'm not 100% sold on Ryan Day and what he's doing up there. I think he, as Jim Harbaugh famously said, sometimes you're born on third base and think you hit a triple, so we'll see.
Look, I get that they're not winning the big games. They're still winning double-digit games. They're still a fertile recruiting base. I mean, when's the last time Ohio State's been down for 2 years in a row? I mean, before either of us were born. So,
I agree.
And maybe you could argue Ohio State's not top 5, but it's got to be in the top 10.
I think Oregon.
After that, I think Oregon. Oregon was on my short list because I think after that it gets interesting. I mean, typically you would say Florida, but I don't know now. Tennessee a year ago looked like it was Tennessee a year ago looked like it was edging its way in that discussion with the NIL, and it might still be. But I mean, you've got you got Ole Miss. I think is definitely got to be on the. I don't know if Ole Miss makes the 10, but it's got to be on the list with what Lane Kiffin's done. I never would have said this a year ago, but you look at what Missouri did this year. You look at what Missouri's doing in the NIL space. I think Missouri's in the discussion. Okay, Texas is on there. Texas is in year 10 somewhere. So that's 5 of them. We've got Texas, Oregon.
Here's the easy answer. You take the top 8. You take the top 8 teams from the SEC, and that's your future right there. I'm telling you, because there may be one team every year in the Big Ten that is capable of breaking through and competing, maybe winning a playoff game. But I would venture to say in a 12-team format where you have to earn it on the field and you have to win multiple games to win a national championship, I think the SEC wins the national championship, not only this year, because I think Alabama wins it this year. I think they win it this year and every year going forward for the foreseeable future. I don't see a Big 10 team out there, and I definitely don't see a Big 12 team capable of just toe-to-toe with the lines of scrimmage and with the amount of talent. And then with what people, SEC teams, Chris, look what Ole Miss is doing to people. Look what LSU and Alabama just taking people from USC saying, oh, give us your best defensive backs, give us your best, this and that. Yeah. They're able to cherry pick and take it away. And I just think it's going to be the rich keep getting richer, and that talent base in the Southeast that fortifies the high school ranks is going to be, just hard to overcome.
Okay, I think Andy Stowe's got a good start here. Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas were 5 we had. LSU, we just had a brain fart on that. LSU's got to be in there. I think Michigan has to be in there, just again, based on history and tradition. The last time Michigan was bad for any stretch of time, I don't even know if that's ever happened. So I think
even if Harbaugh leaves?
Even if Harbaugh leaves.
Okay.
I mean, the chances Michigan can't attract an elite coach are almost nil, or a really good one. So that's right there. That's 7. I mean, you could make a case that Ole Miss is in there. Based on NIL momentum, I think you could make a case for Missouri. I don't know that I'd put them in there. I don't know what to do with Florida. I don't know what to do with Oklahoma. I don't know what to do with Clemson. Clemson would have been an easy one 3 years ago, but it's just not been the same in the NIL era. So that last 3, I think we've got 7, and I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out. Washington could easily be in that discussion. Southern Cal could be in that discussion.
And then there's also going to be some names with the NIL space and how things work, Chris, that are going to come out of nowhere. And and don't laugh when I say this, but somebody like a SMU who's moving to the ACC that has more money than they know what to do with. Yep. I'm just telling you, there's going to be some players that find their way there, and there's going to be, by virtue of being in the ACC, a quote Power 4, whatever we're calling it now, where it may be an easier way to get to the playoff. Because they're still going to have automatic bids and stuff like that. There's going to be some of that pops up every once in a while. But I think year in, year out, it's going to be tough until Nick Saban and Kirby Smart decide to, hang it up and they're done with doing all this kind of stuff year round and around the clock. And then I think it's going to be tough to get Alabama and Georgia out of there. But I think the way that Lane Kiffin is going about doing things, as you mentioned, it's different. But it's also, he's going to take advantage of everything that is out in front of him with NIL and transfer portal and stuff like that. And listen, there's only been a handful of teams that have been ranked in the top 10, the AP top 10 the last 3 years, and Ole Miss is one of them. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. And Eric brings up a point. I put this on the screen because you mentioned somebody coming out of the blue with NIL. Look at Syracuse. Syracuse just nabbed Kyle McCord. So
Syracuse is going to be a good football team with Fran Brown too. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I know. It could be somebody like that. Here's another one, because this is a program that's figured out a way to survive in a lot of climates, and because it's not going to be playing an SEC. Kansas State has always recruited the JUCOs really well.
Chris Kleiman.
Yeah, I mean, how many games a year is Kansas State going to go into is more than a touchdown underdog? If the program stays near the same level it is, not a lot.
It's going to be interesting. And I wonder if what Chip Kelly was talking about with the whole, 64 teams kind of break off and do their own thing and have a commissioner and all this kind of stuff. I think there's going to be big changes happening. And I think part of what we saw in the Orange Bowl, the just absolute drubbing of a team that one was motivated, one was not, one was there, one was not. I think college football is not going to want any more of that, Chris. I think it's bad for the game. And I think there's going to be as many drastic changes, whether it's, financially incentivizing guys to play in bowl games, whether it is, creating some kind of incentive-based stuff to go on with, I don't know, in terms of being able to expand the playoff even further. It may go from 12 to 16 one day. You never know. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But I think what we learned from those 3 games is, one, I think the SEC still has a dominance in terms of talent and speed and things like that we learned in those games that can take over, and I think the culture of the SEC, it means a little bit more than it does in some places. And then two, I think we just learned that, hey, college football's got a lot of issues and a lot of ills that have to be fixed. And we've talked about those exclusively. Do you want to talk about some of the ills with teams like Auburn and Kentucky that didn't get the job done?
Yeah, bigger picture, college football needs a commissioner in the worst way, and it needs to be somebody that's coached and not too long ago. I've said before Nick Saban would be the perfect guy.
Oh, yeah.
The NCAA, I mean, I don't know, Charlie Baker may be great, but the two most incompetent organizations on earth are the NCAA and Congress. And so the NCAA goes and takes a politician to make it his commissioner. Maybe it's going to work. I don't know. You can't typecast everybody based on their past roles, but this should have been figured out by now. I do think NIL is going to be a solution eventually. It should be, in terms of solving some of these bowl game eligibility things, because you don't play, you don't get a check. I think it's that simple. But we haven't hit on Kentucky and Auburn. I know you just brought those up. Those are two other programs that I just don't know what to make of going forward. I know with Hugh Freeze that he's recruited well. He did inherit a great situation. There were just a lot of doubts about him when he left Ole Miss. And again, you're going to be in Nick Saban's shadow for as long as he's coaching college football, which I still think is going to be a few more years. In Kentucky, what a weird situation.
Man.
No, look, what they've done in the transfer market, just with the two kids from Georgia alone, is impressive. But I'll tell you what, Blaine, Devin Leary, and I hate to just single a kid out. I don't know that there was a kid in the league that I was more disappointed in this year than Devin Leary. And I know the passing line was good, but my goodness, I watched that game. That was all on his guys run after catch. Jordan Dingle had that 72-yarder. Barry and Brown still running through defenses between kickoffs and catches. Dane Key had a long one. So much of his passing line was on his guys. He made, at least two, I guess it was three huge turnovers. And maybe some of that was on his offensive line, the fumble, the pass that got batted down and picked. But you got to make better decisions. And just, I think I'd be more willing to give him the benefit of the doubt if he had a better year start to finish. But name one game that you just came away with Kentucky this year and say, hey, Devin Leary is the guy that I thought he was be. I don't recall. And I was on a plane where they were playing Louisville. Maybe that was it. But I just don't think he ever showed up and became that guy that we thought he'd be.
Listen, nobody was a bigger proponent before the year of saying, hey, Devin Leary is going to be special at Kentucky, because I thought he was, based on what he had done at NC State. I mean, when you're breaking Phillip Rivers' records and things of that nature, but with that injury, that he does not look the same in terms of delivering the football. You can see the arm strength at times, but the accuracy is totally off. He just didn't end up being the complete quarterback that Kentucky thought that he would be. And listen, at the end of the day, you do got to give him enough credit. He put that team in position to win that ball game, and the defense couldn't get a stop at the end and get it done. So, even with all the ills and all the accuracy stuff and things like that, Kentucky had a shot to win that ball game. The defense couldn't get it done. And, I do think it's interesting with Mark Stoops, and I think there's going to be a little bit of a, galvanizing of that program, because I think they realized, oh crap, we almost lost our head coach because he almost went to Texas A&M. And I think that there's going to be a little influx. They got money up in Kentucky. Okay, listen, there's people buying horses that cost more than our houses. Okay, so they got money up there, and I think there'll be an influx into the NIL, and they're already getting some players in there. A couple from Georgia, in fact, Jamon Dumas-Johnson and Brock Vandegrift at the quarterback position. So that's the biggest thing for Kentucky. Can they hit at the quarterback position? Because even with Will Levis at times didn't play up to the level that maybe his talent level could have allowed him to. He didn't hit his full potential. So can they get consistent play out of Brock Vandegrift, and can that defense continue to play a Mark Stoops style of defense going forward? I think they had lapses at times this year, but they're very similar, I think, to in Auburn. And hey, there's ability there, there's players there, there's money there. but can they put it all together and get some vertical alignment and get going? Auburn, we're starting to see that. And I think, it was ugly, Chris, against Maryland.
Oh, goodness.
It was ugly.
Ooh.
The quarterback play was atrocious with Peyton Thorne, but I think part of that is because you don't have a whole lot of weapons on the outside. They're not good on third down this year, all that kind of stuff. But Auburn is bringing in a lot of weapons, including 2 5-star receivers out of high school that are going to have to play immediately and come in. And Rivaldo Fairweather comes back at tight end. He was a bright spot for Auburn yesterday. I think they'll be able to run the football well as long as Hugh Freeze is there. So I'm not as concerned about Auburn in terms of what's going on the field, and I think they'll continue to recruit heavily. But my question is do you feel like there's just a glass ceiling for both Kentucky and Auburn, given what the elite of the SEC is out in front of them?
Man, we were on the same page about stuff today. I think Auburn, part of me goes throw yesterday out because it's going to be a completely different situation. They weren't good at receiver anyway, and what they had hit the portal. So, I look there and they're playing Hank Brown, who was playing high school ball in my neck of the woods this time last year. So I don't know. I do wonder if Hugh Freeze can replicate what he did when they really had it rolling at Ole Miss, at Auburn. And that's not saying he can't. It's just more of an I don't know. Kentucky's where I think the two programs that I'm just really on the fence about going into the future are them in Florida. And because, like, on one hand, you said glass ceiling. That is exactly where I was going to go. It kind of feels like Mark Stoops has hit a ceiling there. And look, there's nothing wrong with what he's hit, but he was, looked like he was looking to get out to A&M. And look, I don't blame him. There's probably, I don't know if you can count on both hands coaches that wouldn't think about taking that job anywhere in the country, given the resources and the opportunity. So that's not a knock on Kentucky, but Kentucky traditionally has not put it together for a long period of time. On the other hand, you look at what they just did in the portal with the 2 Georgia kids. You watch them play, and you got Brock Vandegrift throwing presumably to Dane, Key, and Barry and Brown next year. And I don't know if Jordan Dingle's back or not, but
yeah, he is. He entered the portal. He entered the portal, and they are actually able to lure him out of the portal with some NIL money. Yeah. So that's a big deal.
Well, there you go. I mean, look, if devil's advocate here, if Devin Leary had just been anywhere, I don't know, 85% of what we thought he'd be this year, we're probably having a different conversation. And maybe Brock Vandegrift comes in next year and does what we thought Leary would have done this year. Key and Brown get better. Maybe you got 2,000-yard receivers, and you're looking up next year, and Kentucky was this year's Missouri. And I don't know, by the way, J.J. Weaver's coming back for a 6th year on that side of the ball. I don't know that they are. I don't know that it's vintage Mark Stoops' Kentucky defense with their personnel last year, but his bread's buttered on that side. He's always figured it out. So that's one where I can argue either way with Kentucky. I mean, it's kind of dumb to make predictions December 31st for next year with all the variables, but I can give you reasons why and reasons why not with them.
Yeah, and the same thing with Auburn. Just so many games are going to be hinge games. Like just it's going to be field goal games here and there with Auburn. And how much differently are we talking about their season if they pull off even one of those 2 games against Alabama or Georgia? Who cares what happened against Maryland if they beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl and don't allow 4th and 31, or if they prevent Brock Bowers from just going crazy on them, then Auburn's looked totally differently this year, especially with Hugh Freeze's bunch, first year, it being his first year there at Auburn. But back to your point with Kentucky, I did want to say, I think one thing that Kentucky has to look forward to is Vandegrift's legs, because Devin Leary wasn't a real runner. It wasn't as mobile. And I think the style of player that Vandegrift is going to be is going to fit much better into what Liam Cohen likes to do. He's a guy who can make plays, can escape the pocket, and it's going to be interesting to see. So a lot of teams that we've kind of talked about here already in the bowl season, but 2 teams, one current SEC team and one future one, Chris, in Texas, Alabama and Texas, that are going to be playing for a national championship. And it kicks off just a little over 24 hours from now. The Rose Bowl does. So what are you, as we approach that, what are have your thoughts changed any going into seeing some of these bowl games between SEC teams, Big Ten teams? Have you been swayed any by some of the bowl season heading into the CFP game, Alabama and Michigan?
I told somebody this yesterday. I picked Michigan to beat Alabama just based on the stats. I got regrets about that one already. I'll be honest. Some of it was a question of is the Big Ten all that defensively? But just didn't know. And look, the computers had the Big Ten. The top of the Big Ten is the best in the country. I mean, I think what Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan were 3 of the top 5 teams in most of the computers. Now, I don't buy it. I mean, look, and we don't have a lot of interconnectivity between those two leagues. I keep saying that. That's one reason I'm excited about the playoffs, Blaine. I don't know how you tell which league is best, because what's the number of meaningful games that we have between the Big Ten and the SEC every year? I mean, like in a good year, maybe you get, since they're now Big Ten, you get Oregon and Georgia playing a game like they did a year ago, or, maybe Alabama takes on somebody, but you don't ever see you see Alabama, Penn State play every year. You don't see that. You don't ever see the big boys take on each other year to year. So we get to this point in the season where we're just like, okay, that's what the computers say. Let's see if they're right. Watching the Big Ten, I don't think they're right. I don't think their offenses were that impressive. Penn State's got obliterated. Its defense did by Ole Miss. The stats on J.J. McCarthy, I'm sure you've seen that graphic about touchdown passes, pre and post Connor Stallions scandal exposure. I mean, it's crazy. They're not even the same guy. No, some of that schedule, Michigan's was backloaded with tougher teams. I don't want to put it all on that, but just between the catapult thing now that came out, it just feels to me like, but between Michigan not able to dominate the better teams and all this stuff, it makes me wonder. And I would like to retract my pick of Michigan against Alabama, because I just don't have a good feeling on that now in terms of Michigan winning that game.
I picked Alabama to win by double digits, and the reason I did is because I knew when I was watching Alabama do what they did to Georgia that they were the best team in the country. Then once I saw the selection show come up and Michigan's sitting there watching ESPN and they see Alabama pop up at 4, and you could have heard a pin drop in that room. Like, they were not excited about playing the Alabama Crimson Tide. And here's the thing, when it comes to playoff football, the team that typically, when all else is kind of, I would say that the trenches, you could say, or, nip and tuck here and there. I think Alabama overall will be more physical, but when then there's any question about which team, is better, you go with the best player on the field, and that is Jalen Milroe. And Jalen Milroe, I think when his number is called, I do not believe that Michigan will have an answer for it. And that's ultimately why I think Alabama will win that game convincingly. And you give Nick Saban a month to prepare for anybody. And it's just, I think it's going to be really, really tough for Michigan. And we've seen this same song and dance, when Michigan 2 years ago came in with a highly, just highly respected, thought to be really physical team, and got their doors blown off by Georgia in the Orange Bowl. So I think you'll see a similar result in the Rose Bowl. And then, moving on to the Sugar Bowl, Texas, like I said, they're coming into our family here, our SEC family, Chris. And I have already spurned them a little bit and made them a little bit mad, because I am picking the Purple Rain. I'm going with just the feel-good story of Michael Penix. But you like Texas. You think Texas is going to take that game in New Orleans?
I do. Before I go there, I want to backtrack to Alabama for just a minute, because I'm pretty sure you and I talked about this in the preview. I would have to look it up, but I feel like the bulk of sacks that Alabama gave up, and my goodness, they were a lot, were in the first 2/3 of that season. Now look, Alabama's schedule got easier, but Auburn can get after the passer.
Yeah.
Kentucky's capable of it. I mean, LSU, I don't know what to say about the defense, but look, it was an offensive line that got better as the season went on. And with that group presumably gelling and Milroe getting better, I feel like that could be the storyline that we're either talking about. That's why Alabama won it, was that offensive line got better and was able to make things possible for Jalen Milroe, or, hey, we jumped the gun on that and Michigan wrecked them, and that's why Alabama lost the game. So where do you stand on that?
I think that you were starting a true freshman at left tackle, and you just got to get better and better and better. And he continued to get better. And I think that Tommy Rees put Jalen Milroe and company in better positions. They started calling the game more to his skill set, and stop asking him to do some things that maybe they were asking him to do at the beginning of the season, and he didn't hold the ball as much, and he was more decisive. And I think that's why they got better along the offensive line. And they said, hey, if we do struggle being able to protect, let's do some things. Let's move the pocket a little bit. Let's do some things that fit us a little bit better. So I think that's why you saw the improvement. And that's why I think you'll see Alabama have a lot of different answers for what Michigan's going to try to do to them.
On to Texas. Texas was the team I picked to win the playoff when we made our picks a couple of weeks ago. Rightly or wrongly, I've still got that game against Alabama in my head. The other thing I've got, and I get Texas Tech and Oklahoma State weren't the cream of the crop, but they're quality football teams. Texas just went into Georgia like crush your soul mode on those last couple of games. We know that team's got the talent. It's got depth. I still feel pretty good about that. We've talked about the computers. The computers can't tell you everything. I think the computers got the Big Ten wrong. I think the computers got a couple other things wrong. And the computers didn't like Washington all year. Considered Oregon to be about a touchdown better. We saw that panned out. But that's kind of your one warning thing, that the computers have consistently had Texas on a neutral field, probably 7 or 8 points better than Washington. Again, I don't know if that's a legitimate yellow flag or if that's just something we'll circle as not. Because when I watch Washington, especially with Penix and those receivers, they're tough. But I just think Texas is better across the board. And buddy, if you go to Tuscaloosa, you beat Nick Saban at night in a game everybody's circled. I like your chances.
My only issue and my only problem with Texas is the secondary is a major weakness. They're 99th in the country in terms of passing defense, and then when they're in one possession games, that drops to like 116th in the country. So they're not very good in the secondary. And I think with Odunze and McMillan, that's the issue. I think Texas is better up front. So if they can force Penix to hold the ball, if they can cover long enough, I think that they can get to Penix and they can hurt things. And then Texas could end up running the football well on the other side of the ball, and they could end up blowing Washington out. But the only reason that I ended up going with Washington is because the more tape I watched on Texas, the more I saw receivers running wide open down the field on them, and you cannot do that against Michael Penix. And every time somebody has counted Michael Penix Jr. out, he's ended up making them wrong. And I just feel like listen, the offensive line, I don't think they should have won the Joe Moore Award at Washington, but they're good enough to hold up. And those 3 receivers over there they're all going to be pros. So I think that, and then Dylan Johnson, keeping this SEC, centered, came from Mississippi State, and my goodness, he did a great job and gives Washington balance over there. So that's the only reason I'm going with Washington in the Sugar Bowl, is because of, I just think ultimately Texas is not good enough in their pass defense, and I think that Odunze, McMillan, those guys with Penix slinging the ball around the yard, and then Dylan Johnson being able to provide some balance, I think they'll end up winning a a very high scoring game. I think it's going to be like 37-35. It's going to be a barn burner. And hey, that we all win if it's that kind of a matchup, Chris. That'll be fun to watch. You're muted, Chris. Chris, you're muted. You there?
Sorry. Yeah, I don't think Texas is going to go in and just wipe the field with Washington. I do think it'll be fun. Penix has had a habit of making huge plays all year. Mobility concerns me a little bit there. He wasn't the most mobile guy in the world. Feels like you need that type of guy in this day and age of college football, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else? We've been going about 45 minutes strong here. Everybody, we got hundreds of people in here. Please do us a favor. Just hit that like button right now. That's all you have to do. Hit that like button. That helps us out tremendously. Subscribe. If you don't subscribe, you got to understand this is probably our last day here as Southeastern 14. We're going to go through a little bit of a rebrand, and we would love for you to be a part of the journey with us as we're going to cover all things SEC going forward. Of course, continue our football coverage. Blake and Chris do a great job with basketball. Max Barr has come on as help out with basketball. Chris does a great job with baseball. And Chris, don't let me forget, this off air, I got a fan on here. Somebody that wants to help you out with baseball this year. He would love to provide some assistance with baseball. So we got people wanting to be a part of this thing, and so excited that people are wanting to be a part of it. So like, subscribe, turn on notifications. That greatly helps us out, and continues to drive our engagement here.
Yeah, if you're new to the channel, we cover baseball, football, and basketball with equal passion. We spend a lot of time on it. A lot of 7-day work weeks around here. And what I always tell people is if you want to follow your team, you're going to find people in your market that cover your team better than we do. But if you want to look at all the teams in the league at a glance, I think we do as good a job of that as anybody. I'm going to call an audible here. Let's look forward a little bit.
Yeah.
We've talked about how opt-outs have ruined bowl games. There's one bowl game that I think got more interesting because of people that aren't there. And I think that's Iowa, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Because now Josh Heupel gets to roll his new toy out with no excuses or reservations. Joe Milton's opted out of the bowl game against Iowa.
I learned how to pronounce his name.
Let's hear it. I want to see if you can do it. I think I can do it, but I want to see if you can do it.
Nico Iamaleava. Okay.
Oh,
Nico
okay.
Iamaleava. Iamaleava. That's how it is.
I had it wrong.
Like Iamaleava. And I thought it was Iamaleava for a long time. That's what it looked like to me. But it's Nico Iamaleava. So Nico, the Nico era is starting, and it's going to be interesting to see. But you talk about one defense that I think is legit is that Iowa defense, because that's what they literally live on their defense. Okay. That they survive on defense and punting. So it's going to be like punting is a weapon for Iowa. Like, so it's going to be interesting to see. That's a tough first start for Nico, but I'm excited to see.
Well, here's the other side, right? There was nothing interesting about Iowa's offense this year, other than just like how wretched can it get? How many punts can we see? Well, does Tennessee have anybody in its secondary for this game that started for them on a regular basis?
They had 6 guys hit the portal, so I don't think that's possible. So
so it's this. Okay, we know Iowa can't pass against just about anybody. Tennessee's secondary wasn't fantastic this year with its guys. Does this level the playing field where Iowa can make it semi-interesting throwing the ball? I tend to think not. But that's why I think this is the one game that got more interesting with the portal. I'm more interested in this game now, given who's not there and the dynamics in play, than I was before if everybody had been full strength.
Oh, let's call it what it is. Josh Heupel did a great job of forcing Joe Milton not to play in this game. Joe Milton wanted to play in this game. I'm telling you, I promise that's what happened. He wanted to play in this game, and they basically told him, "Hey, buddy, we got to see what we got here in Nico." And that comes from reports inside of the Tennessee program. I mean, it was a deal where Joe wanted to stick around and play and maybe split time with Nico, and they're like, "No, we need to we need to move on. We need to turn the page. They were as loyal to that man as they could be, way more loyal than they should have been. And now we're going to get to see Nico Iamaleava go out there and do his part. So we'll see what happens. But I think that you're going to see a guy that is dynamic, but at the same time, it's hard to go out there and just perform, crisply against a Iowa team that is going to be as fundamentally coached and as hard hitting and all that kind of stuff as any defense you're going to see out there. I think the things that you got to look for, and I put a video out on this, just watch his feet. Does he have calm feet in the pocket? Does he take, what's available to him, check downs and backs out of the backfield, that kind of stuff? And then can he layer some of the throws? Can he put one in front of a safety, behind a linebacker, throw the changeup, if you will? That's what our friend Jake Crane said, that Joe Milton couldn't throw the changeup. All he had was the four seam. You know what I'm saying? He was ripping it in there. He couldn't pull the string any at all. And if Nico can show the ability to do that, regardless of the result, regardless of the if it's a win or a loss, or if he throws 3 picks or 3 touchdowns, if he shows those things, then I think you have to have excitement for 2024 in Tennessee's offense, Chris.
I got one reservation for you, Blayne, and that's this. What was the reason that Josh Heupel said he was not throwing Nico in there all season? You remember that? Because he told us.
I think he wasn't ready to handle the offense yet. Like he didn't have all of it, and it was the fundamentals that he got. He said he kept saying he got better fundamentally as the year went on.
Well, maybe you and I heard him different times. What I heard late in the season was, I'm not sure I trust our offensive line to keep him healthy. Now, look, you got to take the bubble wrap off guys at some point, and maybe this is the time to do it, because you get an idea of what this looks like in a game, and you got a season to process it. Plus, if he gets hurt, you got a long time to recover. Unless it's really bad, he's ready for the opener next year. But look, Iowa's defense is salty, as we know. And if keeping him upright and healthy is an issue, and you're worried about keeping him healthy, I don't think it's a thing where it's cut and dried. Now, look, again, you've got to take the bubble wrap off these guys at some point. And maybe it helps to where, look, you score 14 points in this game, you got a decent shot to win. You're not putting all the pressure on your guy right away to win a shootout with Oregon or Washington or whoever it might be. Maybe that's why this is the right spot. But I do have some questions based on Josh Heupel's concern with his protection that was mentioned late in the season.
This thing is the great call, because you look at Tennessee's schedule and you don't second game that Nico Iamaleava ever plays in to be NC State on a neutral site. I mean, I think you want him to get reps against a quality defense where he can have this in his memory bank and say, hey, remember what happened wrong here? Remember what happened right here? You can draw back upon that. And I think that's going to be the biggest benefit of this game. Like I said, I said this in the video I did on Nico. I had a baseball coach, Chris, that told me, hey, don't be a prostitute to results. What does that mean? That means just because you look in the box score and you went 3 for 4 that day, that doesn't mean that you went through the right process, right? You may have swung at bad pitches. You may have swung in bad counts. You may have hit the ball off the end of the bat and it found a hole somewhere. Just because you had good results doesn't mean you had the right process. And conversely, the same thing can happen in baseball bad, right? You go in there, you get a good count, you swing at a good pitch, and you lace it to the third baseman and he catches a line drive where you're 0 for 1. Well, here's the thing with Nico. Don't worry so much about the results of this game. Just worry about the process. How did the fundamentals look? Is he able to show the arm talent? Yes, so he'll show that at different times, but can he show some of those nuanced throws, and can he show a high level understanding of what they're trying to do offensively? If he does that, regardless of what ends up happening against a very, very tough defense, like you said, then I think you feel much better week 2 next year against NC State, week 4 going to Norman, Oklahoma.
Yeah. Well, and as somebody pointed out in the chat, Tennessee's a run-first team, has been for a couple years, although it wasn't as pronounced this year as I thought 51% of the time. I have a feeling they'll be a little more run-heavy tomorrow than 51%, but that
I
is a
also
fair
think
point
Kirk
also.
Ferentz will try to take that away.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I'm sure they're going to try to make him throw it. And look, his group of wideouts was not the group that Hendon Hooker had last year. That's been obvious for a while. It's not like that they're bad, but it's not the same group they had a year ago.
It's not.
Also,
Jalen
don't have
Hyatt
a first-round left
Tony.
tackle either. So, yeah.
Exactly. All right, Chris. Well, we've been going at it almost an hour strong. I think we've covered a lot of stuff. What tell everybody what we got coming up. Like I said, we got rebrand. We got all kinds of stuff going on here on the channel.
Yeah, we've got a rebrand. We've got a lot of college basketball talk. I've been out of the action for a couple of weeks, just being sick with the flu and family stuff. I'm getting back into it. Max Barr and Blake Lovell have done just an incredible job covering SEC basketball, as well as you'll see it covered anywhere, anytime by anybody. So I'll be plugging back in with those guys there. We have been paying a lot of attention to SEC hoops. I know a lot of people don't start to do that until bowl season's over. We've been following it for 2 months. I've started my baseball prep work. I am super excited about this SEC baseball season ahead. I think you're going to see a return to the website. We leaned heavy on that for a while, not so much the last year or two. So we're going to have some stuff with that soon. And look, we've had a couple of good years. We hadn't been around that long here at Southeastern 14, but I think that 2024 is going to be our best year yet. And man, Blayne, as we wind down the new year, grateful for our audience. We've got some great people out there. I know a lot of the names in the chat. You guys have been here just about every time we turn this thing on. We appreciate you guys. Wish you guys a happy new year. And I'm also thankful for the people that I work with. Blayne, you're certainly on that list. Your passion and knowledge of football has been infectious. You brought so much to our channel. Grateful for Blake Lovell and Max. People who have been here know those guys. I just could not have a better team of people to work with. I thank you guys and love our audience. Look, so many nice people
Caroline,
out there.
T and Caroline, we got to shout them out.
Absolutely. And hey guys, Justin Holland, Justin's one of our regulars who just popped in here. And look, we're in Nashville, at least I am, you're not, but the rest of us are. SEC tournament's coming up here this year in March, as it always is. Would love to put some faces with some screen names. So if you guys are coming up for the SEC basketball tournament, one of my New Year's wishes would to be able to meet a lot of you guys in person. That'd be a real thrill. So hopefully that'll happen. Blayne, we got to get up here for the SEC basketball tournament. Can we make that happen?
I'm definitely going to be up for media days next year. Where I don't know if it's in Nashville. I don't know where it is next year.
It's in Austin, I think, or in Dallas.
Yeah, we'll end up doing something for media days. I should be able to make that this year. So we're gonna get it. Justin with another super chat. He couldn't end the year without a super chat. We appreciate it, Justin. But like I said, as Chris said, we greatly appreciate everything. I'm going to continue right along with football coverage. Football's not over here. We're going to keep going on, talking about next year, leading up to spring practice, transfer portal, all the different stuff that's continuing to go on. So we'll have that all covered for you. Remember to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, tell your friends about us. And Chris, go ahead and take us home, my friend.
Yeah, happy New Year. Happy football watching tomorrow. May your team win. God bless you all. Thank you all. This has been Southeastern 14 presented by Bet Online.